Welcome back to Monster Tamer, a 2D Pokemon-like RPG created Phaser 3. Previously, we wrapped up creating our new game objects and our animations for being able to catch monsters in our game. If you missed the previous videos, there'll be links in the video description to the source code to this point, as well as the complete source code for this video. There'll also be links to previous videos if you'd like to catch up. So let's get started. So now we have our game objects and our animations for being able to catch monsters. Before we get into our battle scene, we need to go ahead and update a few of our utility classes, so our inventory scene and our battle menu, to support be able to use our capture item either from battle or from our world scene. So to get started, what we're going to do is we're going to jump into our inventory scene and we're going to start adding in some logic to handle using our various item types. And so what we're going to want to do is, depending on the scene that we come from in order to get into our inventory scene, we'll want to be able to use select items. As an example, if I get to my inventory scene by going from the world scene and selecting our bag to go into our inventory, we will want to allow the player to use things like potions so we can heal their monsters outside battle. But then for battle items like catching enemy monsters, we don't want them to actually use them. And so we're going to need a mechanism in place to check our player's input to make sure they're using the right items at the right time. And if they're not, we need to provide them some feedback so they know that they can actually use them. And so to go ahead and do this, we're going to follow some patterns that we did in some of our other scenes. And when we handle player input, basically if they try to do something that's not allowed, we're going to show them a message that they need to acknowledge, and then they can go ahead and go back to provide input. So to go ahead and do this, in our inventory scene class, the first thing we do is we're going to add a new property to show that we're waiting for input. So do waiting for input. And let's go ahead and copy our type here, and we'll go ahead and make this a Boolean. And what we'll do is we come down to our init method, we'll go ahead and set this to a default value of false. And so we'll do this, we'll do waiting for input, we'll do false. So now what we'll want to do is down in our update method, when we listen for our player input, we'll need to check to see if we are waiting for input, and if so, then we want to go ahead and clear that flag and set it to false, and then go ahead and update our item text description to erase our message. So what we'll do is first we'll start with our back key. So if we press our back key, we just want to go ahead and do that check. So we'll do if we're waiting for our input, then we want to go ahead and return, and we don't want to actually go back to our previous scene. But what we'll want to do is we'll reset waiting for input back to false. And then we want to go ahead and update our text we display to our player. So we'll do our update item text description. All right, we'll also want to do the same thing if we press our space key. So if we press our space key and we're waiting for the player to provide input, this will allow them to clear that before we do anything else. So we're just going to copy that and we'll paste it down here. All right, so now we have our logic for handling when we're waiting for input. Now we need to actually update our logic for when we want to use our item. So currently we have logic in place just to make sure we have more than one item. And if so, we transition to our monster party scene, so then that way we can select the monster we want to use an item on. Now we need to go ahead and refactor this logic because some of our items don't require us to do that. And as an example, our capture item, we want to go ahead and just return to our battle scene and use that item. If we're not coming from our battle scene, then we want to go ahead and show our message that says, hey, you can't actually use this. And so go ahead and do this. The first thing we want to do is we need to check which scene we're coming from. And so we're just going to add an if statement. We'll do if our scene data, our previous scene name, is equal to our scene keys and our battle scene. Then we're going to want to check which type of item we're trying to use and react accordingly. And so I'm just going to do a to-do for this. If we're not coming from our battle scene, then we're going to go ahead and assume we're coming from our world scene. And so now we need to check our item type, and depending on which type of item we're trying to use, we'll react accordingly. And so what we'll do is we're going to add a check. So we need to know which item we're trying to use. And so what we'll do is we'll come outside this. Let's make a variable to store that. So we'll do const selected item is going to be equal to this, our inventory. And then we'll use our selected inventory option index. And we want to go ahead and grab our item. So now we have our item. What we're going to do is if our selected item, and we will reference our category. So if we're trying to use a capture item, when we're not in our battle scene, we want to go ahead and display a message to the player. So what we'll do is we'll do this. We'll do our selected inventory description text, and we'll do set text. And what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and make a variable to store this. We'll do cannot use item text. And what we'll do is let's go ahead and define that. If we come up to the top of our class, go ahead and paste our variable up here. And we're just going to say that item cannot be used right now. And then that way we can go ahead and reuse this for various other battle items we might add in the future. So we come back down to our code. After we display our message, we want to go ahead and set this, waiting for input. We want to set equal to true, and we'll go ahead and return. All right, so the last thing we'll want to do is if our space key wasn't pressed, if we're waiting for input, we do not want to handle our arrows. And so we'll just add a safeguard here. We'll do if this, waiting for input. Then we want to go ahead and just return. All right, so we should go ahead and test our changes. Let's go ahead and jump over to our preload scene, and we're going to go ahead and just have us start right off in the world scene, so we can go ahead and navigate into our menu. So what we should be able to do is, if we go ahead and open up our menu, let's go into our bag. If we try to use our damage ball, we'll see, hey, we can't use that item right now. And then if we go ahead and select another item, we're taken to our other scene like we expect. And then real quick, what we'll go ahead and do, let's go ahead and refresh our scene. And actually, let's go to our preload scene. Let's jump right into a battle scene. Let's go ahead and go into our items. Let's do damage ball. Oh, it shows we cannot use our item right now. Yeah, so back in our inventory scene, we just have our to-do. What we'll do real quick, let's just add a return statement so we don't run the rest of our code. And now if we go ahead and try using our item, nothing happens. And that's what we expect because we haven't done anything yet. All right, so now we verified that logic. What we need to do now is we need to add in our logic for when we're coming from our battle scene and we're trying to use our various items. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to check which type of item we're trying to use if we're coming from our battle scene. So if we are coming from our battle scene, the only item we're going to be using will be our capture item. If we try to select a potion, we still want to go to our scene where we select a monster. And so what we're going to go ahead and do is let's go and get rid of our to-do and our return. And let's add an if statement. And so what we'll do is we'll do if. And so we'll go ahead and do our if statement, and we're going to check our item category. So we'll do selected item, that category is equal to our item category, and we'll do our capture. And what we want to go ahead and do is we need to go ahead and update our inventory, similar like what we're doing when our scene is resumed. And so to go ahead and do this, we're just going to reference a new method, and we're just going to call this handle item used. And so after we do that, we'll want to go ahead and go back to our previous scene. And we want to go ahead and pass in the item that was used. So we'll do this. We'll go back to previous scene. And we'll go ahead and do true because an item was used. And we'll go ahead and pass in our selected item that we used. And then after we do that, we'll go ahead and return so we don't run the rest of our code. So let's go ahead and go down to the bottom of our class. We'll go ahead and create our new private method. And so we're just going to do handle item used. And so what we'll want to do in this method is we're going to want to do the exact same logic that we're doing in our scene resume, where we decrement our quantity. And so basically this logic right here, where we grab our selected item, we update our quantity, and we update our text, we want to go ahead and do that same logic. And so we're just going to copy this. We're going to go ahead and paste that down in our other method. And then what we'll do is back up here. Let's go ahead and just call our new method. And so we just use the same logic from one location. So we'll do this. Handle item used. All right, and then what we'll need to do is also, let's go ahead and grab our logic for updating our inventory because we'll also want to do that as well. So we'll go ahead and paste that. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to return our selected item. So then that way we have it as a reference here. So we'll do const selected item will be equal to our method. And then what we can do is we come down here. Let's go ahead and return our selected item. Let's go and get rid of this logic here. And then what we'll do is instead of doing selected item, we're just going to do updated item since it has been modified. And so we'll just update our reference. All right, so if we want to go ahead and test our changes, let's come back to our battle scene. And if we go into our inventory, if we do a potion, we see we're taken to our monster party scene. We're going to select a monster. If we go back, if we do our damaged ball, we jump back to our battle scene and we can see that the item we're trying to use is our damaged ball. All right, so the last thing we're going to go ahead and do is we're just going to add a safeguard for when we're trying to capture monsters. We're just going to make sure that our player's party is in full. So currently we don't have a system for storing monsters anywhere besides in our player's party. And so once we have 6 monsters in our party, we either need to add logic so we can release a monster to add a new monster to our party, or we need to go ahead and just not allow them to use an item. So for the time being, we're just going to add a safety check where if we're at our full capacity, we won't be able to use our capture item to capture a new monster. And so go ahead and add this check. What we're going to do is we're going to add a new method to our data manager so we can quickly check to see if our party's full. So if we go ahead and open up our data manager, what we'll do is let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and add a new public method. So after our add item picked up method, let's go ahead and do is party full. And so this method is just going to go ahead and return a Boolean. So what we'll do is we're going to reference our party size. We'll do const party size. is equal to our store. We want to do get. We'll go ahead and do our data manager store keys, and we'll do our monsters and party, and we're going to grab our length. So then we're just going to go ahead and return if our party size is equal to 6, then our party's full and we don't want to be able to catch monsters. So now what we'll do is if we jump back to our inventory scene, so when we're in our battle scene and we're trying to use our capture item, we're just going to add that safeguard. So we'll do if our data manager dot is party full. So if our party is full, then we don't want to use our item. So we'll go ahead and return. But what we want to do is we'll want to go ahead and do waiting for input, and we'll set our text. So we'll do this, waiting for input is equal to true. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and do this, our selected inventory description text, and we're going to call our set text method. And we're going to do, you have no room in your party, cannot use that item. All right, so one last thing we're going to do is we're going to throw a to-do in here. Because like I said, this is just a safeguard for once our monster party is full, and we can go ahead and revisit this logic later on once our capture functionality is working. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw a to-do in here, and we'll just say, hey, we need to update this once we can support a monster storage system. All right, so we should be able to go ahead and test our changes. So if we jump into our battle scene, let's go ahead and try using an item. If we do our damage ball, it should work because we don't have a full party. But what we'll do is let's jump over to our data manager, and we're just going to say, hey, if our party size is 3, because that's what we currently have, we'll say we're full. We try to use our item. We see our new message shows up, and we're not able to use it. And let's go ahead and reset that back to 6. All right, so the last thing we're going to go ahead and do in our inventory scene is we're going to refactor some of our property names for our scene resume data. So currently we have this property called item used, and it's a Boolean. And this can be a little bit confusing because item used could be inferred as the item that was actually used versus we want to know if an item was used. And so what we're going to do is we're going to change this to be was item used. So then that way it's very clear that, hey, this is saying that an item was used because we already have a property for the item that was used. So we're going to go ahead and change both those. So then we'll have to update our references in our code. And so we'll go ahead and update that down here in our handle scene resume. And then we're going to go ahead and just use our shorthand here. Just going to get rid of that. And we'll go ahead and save. So due to this change, this will also mean we have to change a few other scenes. Let's go ahead and open up our monster party scene. And so in our monster party scene, we're going to go ahead and look for item used. And so when we go back to our previous scene, we want to do was item used. And that way we can make this consistent. All right, so one other place we need to make this change will be over in our battle menu. So let's go ahead and jump over to that class. And so what we'll want to do is in our handle scene resume, instead of item used, we'll do was item used. All right, so just to make this consistent, we're also going to do it in a few other locations. Let's jump over to our battle scene. And so for our battle scene was resumed, we need to change this to was item used. If we jump over to our battle menu, likewise in our handle scene resume, since we're coming from our inventory, we'll do was item used. And we'll go ahead and save. All right, so one last thing we need to do is in our battle menu, we need to go ahead and add support for actually returning the item that was actually used. So inside our battle menu, currently, we are just keeping track if an item was actually used. We don't actually keep track of the actual details. And so we'll need to know which item was actually used. So then that way we can do different things in our battle scene depending on what was used. As an example, if we're using a capture item, then that's going to affect our catch rates. If we're using something like an attack booster, then we need that to affect our monster's attacks. And so what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to add a property to keep track of if an item was used. And then we'll also have our Boolean if one was used. And so what we'll go ahead and do is we're going to update this used item here. We're going to go ahead and change that from a Boolean. That'll actually be our item. Then we'll add a new property for was item used. So let's go ahead and copy this. And we're going to do was. And we'll do was item used. So then what we'll do is let's change this used item. This is going to be our item, or it can be undefined if an item wasn't used. So now what we can do is down our code, let's go ahead and update this. So we'll do this was item used. We're going to do false, and used item, we're going to set that equal to undefined. So now if we come down to our various touch points, what we'll do is was item used. This needs to use our new reference. And then let's go ahead and copy this. We'll add a getter for our item. So we'll do item used. And so this is going to return an item or undefined if one was not used. And we'll go ahead and return used item. So in a few more other spots, we need to update this in our show main battle menu. So let's go ahead and copy this. I'm going to paste it down here. And then what we'll do is we'll do was item used, and then we'll do used item is going to be equal to undefined. And then finally at the bottom of our class, we need to go ahead and update one more reference. And so we have used item. And so we're going to do was item used will be equal to true. And then we'll do this item used item will be equal to our data in our item. All right, so with our changes, we're just going to go ahead and do some quick testing to make sure everything's still working. So what we'll go ahead and do is let's go into battle. Let's do a fight real quick so we take some damage. Go into our items. Let's try using a potion. If we choose one of our monsters that's fully healed, we can't use them. Let's use Iguana Knight. We'll go ahead and heal our monster. We jump back to our battle scene. You can see which item we used. Our monster is now healed and we're attacked by the enemy monster. All right. So if we go into our items, let's try our damaged ball. You can see our item was used. And so right now in battle, we don't do anything with it, which is fine. And so we can see we were attacked because we took an action. And if we go into our items, we can see that we used one of each of our items. All right, so one last change. Let's go over to our preload scene, and we're going to go ahead and reset our scene back to our title scene. All right, with that brings this video to an end. In our next video, we're going to start working on updating our battle scene to handle when we use our capture items. And so we'll be adding in some new states tied to using items in our battle. So as a reminder, there's a link in the description of the video to the complete source code for this video. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did enjoy the video, please consider liking the video and hitting the bell icon to be notified when the next video in the series is released. For more great Phaser 3 content, please find the links on your screen now.